Welcome back to my channel. Today we are in for a little treat. Two women got together and wrote a book, and we are about to hear the details of said book. It's a history on hair from Black women. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lisa Lord. Apart from working here at the University of Penn, I also lead a public speaking organization called Strictly Speaky Toastmasters that meets here at the Penn Bookstore. I'd like to thank our gracious host, Kimberly Berry, for allowing us to meet here and for inviting me to introduce two phenomenal women authors appearing here today. Ayana Byrd is a writer and editor living in Brooklyn, New York. A Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Columbia University's Bernard College, she is an entertainment journalist whose work has appeared in Vibe, Rolling Stone, Honey, TV Guide, and paper magazines. She has appeared on a number of panels to discuss the issue of gender, class, and race, and including appearing at Harvard's Black Arts Festival. Lori L. Tharps is a graduate of Smith College and received her master's degree from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. She also lives in Brooklyn, New York, and is currently employed as a correspondent for Entertainment Weekly. Her work has appeared in Essence, Vibe, Savoy, and Ms. magazines. She is a contributor to the upcoming anthology, Young Wives' Tales, New Adventures in Love and Partnership. Together, Byrd and Tharps have collaborated on a unique new cultural history, Hair Story, Untangling the Roots of Black Hair in America. Hair Story explores the unique issue of African American hair and all of its complexities. The authors delve into the history and culture of Black hair and explain how something so seemingly superficial has such far-reaching effects. It profiles major Black hair icons such as Madam C.J. Walker and Nat, also known as the Bush Doctor Mathis. And it also includes interviews with celebrities such as Tyra Banks and Lisa Bonet, stylish and cultural critics. This book examines the historically loaded terms good and bad hair that exist within Black communities. And it traces a unique aspect of American history that people of all races will enjoy as a reference guide for celebrating and understanding Black hair. As part of the Penn Author Series here at the Penn Bookstore, please join me in welcoming the authors, Ayana D. Byrd and Lori L. Tharps.
Thank you very much.
Hi. Thanks for coming out on this rainy day. It's not 65 degrees like they said it would be. Go ahead.
We'd like to start by getting people involved in this discussion right from the beginning, and we had some questions to ask, and if you know the answer, just feel free to yell it out. If you want to raise your hand, it makes you comfortable, you can raise your hand, but just if you know the answer, just shout it out.
What hairstyle was Michael Jackson wearing in 1984 when it caught on fire during the filming of the Pepsi commercial? All right.
Jerry curl. Yes, that is correct. What hairstyle caused the United States military, several commercial airline companies, and hospitals across the country to change their uniform requirements.
Yeah.
The afro, that is correct. The afro was in the 60s when people started wearing the afro in such great numbers. Military hats, nurses' hats, they could not accommodate that much hair, so they had to actually change the standard size of these hats, which
Now, let me know in the comments, did you know that because of the afro, the things needed to be changed? I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't know that.
might sound like a superficial change, but the fact that it made such a impact that these government organizations and private organizations had to take note of something that Black people were collectively doing, just as one implication of the power of Black hair.
And the last question is, what was the first Black-owned company to be traded on the American Stock Exchange? Speak a little louder.
It's Johnson Products, correct? The makers of things like Johnson Soft Sheen Relaxer, the Johnson Blue. What is the hair grease? Is it Johnson?
The blue grease. I don't know.
The jar of blue stuff. Yeah, right. Exactly. So these were some of the questions. These were some of the questions that we thought about and were intrigued by that kind of got us on this journey of hair. And the way this book started was two separate projects. When I was in graduate school at Columbia, I had to choose a topic to write about for a year-long thesis, and I chose to do a paper on Black hair, on the politics, history, and economics of Black hair. And originally, my advisor told me that that wasn't a topic, that there was no way I could write a full year's project on Black hair. She was a white woman from England who really just had no belief, no idea that there could be something could be done of that magnitude on hair. And I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And she agreed to let me try. And when she saw the finished product, she was so impressed by all of this information that she'd never known about. And she ended up taking my paper and giving it to a friend who had just adopted a Black child. It was a white friend who had adopted a Black child. She told me that I should turn this into a book. And at the time, I was just worrying about finding a job, so I really didn't think about writing a book. But it was in the back of my mind that there was even more to say. And I graduated in 1997 and started working at Vibe magazine, where I met Ayana.
And
I'm gonna be honest with you, when she said about the European woman that adopted the Black child, I got mixed feelings from that. The trauma started up under Trump's first presidency. Um, we was on Facebook, and it was a lady on there talking about how she adopts a lot of Black kids, and she was talking about all the different things that she forced them to do. I mean, not true enough. Yeah, she was reported, and I'm sure something probably happened. I don't know. I didn't really update the story because once I read through the things that she forces them to do, I was so uh, stressed and angered at the same time that yeah, it was best for me to just disappear off of that because I didn't like the thoughts that was coming into my mind. But she was saying things like she would make brother and sister lay in the bed together and then force upon them that they were not brother and sister just so they could. I'm pretty sure you understand where I'm going with this. But yeah, I did not like that one bit. But tell me your thoughts about that in the comments.
in 1993, I was at Barnard College and had to do a sociology paper for a class on American popular culture, and decided I was going to do something on Black women in beauty images. But the night before the paper was due, all I had were my 3 Black roommates to interview for the paper, and so I started talking to them, and all of their issues that kept coming up were about hair. And so I decided, well, that was even easier to just write about hair because it was a narrower topic. And it was also something I had been very interested in. I had cut all of my hair off to about this long the year before, and I'd done it because I thought, oh, it'll be easy, and I can go out in the rain and not have to worry about it. I can go to the gym. And really, it impacted me in ways that I hadn't thought it would when I first cut it off. It impacted my self-esteem. It made me think like, oh, boys aren't going to talk to me, and all these different things that I did not think would come up over a haircut. And so a lot of these women, I thought I was crazy when I had all of these thoughts and concerns and worries a year before I did my paper. But the women that I spoke to also said a lot of the same things, and I realized it was a topic that wasn't just me being obsessive and dramatic. And so I did this paper, and my professor was kind of like, oh, black hair, great. And it was a white man who really thought I was just crazy to try to cram 10 pages worth of anything about hair. But when it was over, the same with Lori. He thought it was wonderful, and he Xeroxed it, and he took it to a conference, and, oh, you have to write a book. And I was like, no, I just have to, graduate. And then the next year, I had to do an honors project, and I decided to do a collection of essays on hair, and black women. And my paper, unlike Lori's, was more sociological. And we met at Vibe, as she said, in 1997, and realized we'd both done these projects on hair with professors who had initially thought, oh, is that even a topic, who ended up telling us to do a book. And so we figured, okay, we'll do a book. And it took us about another year to really decide to write the book, and so we did.
And excuse me, besides the ideas that we had formulated in these years in our own personal projects, we had also just had so much reinforcement by black people in this country who had so many common experiences, feelings, interactions in the workplace, at school, at summer camp, where we said all of these commonalities need to be documented. There has to be a reason that black people can talk to one another, perfect strangers, go up to one another and say, did this ever happen to you, or how did you do this to your hair? And there's an instant recognition, there's an instant bond there. So we thought there's something there that should be written down. And also, there are so many times that non-black people were curious about black hair. They had questions, and they didn't even know how to state the question. They would want to know, how did you do that to your hair? Why do black people, get so concerned about rain? Or how come my coworker had short hair yesterday and today it's down to her back? And why, all these questions. And we thought, again, there needs to be something that non-black people who do have questions and maybe don't want to go and be obnoxious or rude or seem to be uneducated about black people can also just pick up a book and say, oh, I understand. It's more than just hair. There is something to be said. There is a history there, and that's also what we wanted to do with this book.
Let me know in the comments, have you ever experienced a situation, or maybe heard a coworker or a friend detail things about their hair within the workplace, friends, whether it was negative or positive? Can you please paint me a picture in the comments? I'm curious, and I definitely want to hear what you have to say or what you experienced. Also, this book, Hair Story, I will make sure that is in the description box below, if I can find it on Amazon.
And finally, it was important for us to write a book that just documented chronologically just the history behind the hair. We're not qualified to do any kind of how-to hair care book, and which I think a lot of people assume that that's what it is. It's not. We also felt like it was really important to do a book that did not necessarily state our personal opinions. And actually, as we wrote the book, I think my opinions about hair changed a lot. But we just wanted to state the different aesthetic, political, economic meanings that our hair has always had. And it definitely includes the opinions of a lot of different people, but thank you. But not necessarily of us. And a lot of times when people look at us and assume, oh, well, they have dreadlocks, they must think that if you have straight hair, it means X, Y, and Z, and if you have natural hair, it means your consciousness is, whatever. And we did not want that to come across in the book because, oh, look, there's my grandmother. Sorry. Because we felt like the history of our hair is so rich, and it's not just about the struggles, and it's not just about, oh, should you wear your hair natural, should you wear it straight? It's also just celebrating all the different looks that we've had and the artistry behind it. So with that, we are going to start reading a few selections from it. I know most people are here for lunch, so we're going to keep it really short.
Don't lean on the podium. Okay. As we stated, The book is chronological. It starts in Africa in the 1400s and goes all the way to today. Chapter by chapter, we go through a different period of history. And obviously, the first place we have to begin is in Africa before the people who we consider Black Americans now were in the West African countries. So, excuse me. The story starts in Africa, Black hair in bondage, 1400 through 1899. The story of Black people's hair begins where everything began, in Africa. Not surprisingly, the birthplace of both astronomy and alchemy also gave rise to a people in perfect harmony with their environment. Indeed, the dense spiraling curls of African hair demonstrate evolutionary genius. Like natural air conditioning, this frizzy, kinky hair insulates the head from the brutal intensity of the sun's rays. Of course, there's not one single type of African hair, just as there's not one single type of African. The variety of hair textures from Western Africa alone ranges from the deep, ebony, kinky curls of the Mandingos to the loosely curled, flowing locks of the Ashanti. The one constant Africans share when it comes to hair is the social and cultural significance intrinsic to each beautiful strand. In the early 15th century, hair functioned as a carrier of messages in most West African societies. The citizens of these societies, including the Wolof, Mendi, Mandingo, Yoruba, were the people who filled the slave ships that sailed to the New World. Within these cultures, hair was an integral part of a complex language system. Ever since African civilizations bloomed, hairstyles have been used to indicate a person's marital status, age, religion, ethnic identity, wealth, and rank within the community. The rest of the chapter goes on to explain how important the hairstyle was to the individual African. It was really we said earlier this morning, it was almost like your social security number, because it wasn't just your name, it was everything about you could be ascertained just by looking at your hair. I could look at somebody and say, oh, I know your name is Jan Smith, and that you work here, and this is the profession you're in, and you're at this level of society. And also that the hair had spiritual connotations to it. A person's spirit was connected to the hair. Therefore, anybody who was a hairdresser also had a very elevated place in society, because, you would not trust just anybody to touch this precious possession you had. And then when the Africans were captured by slave traders, one of the first things that the slave traders did was shave off the hair, probably just as a hygiene thing, but in essence, what they were doing was cutting off their identity. I mean, it was really just stripping them of who they were.
Go in the comments and do me a favor. I want you to think about the hairstyle that you currently have on your head. And paint me a picture in the comments. What do your hairstyle tell you or tell the world about you? I mean, look at it as a way for me to get to know who you are as a person.
And then in slavery, you had a lifestyle which clearly was not conducive to maintaining these elaborate and beautiful hairstyles. And on top of that, the stress, the poor nutrition, and just the degrading lifestyle was really detrimental to anybody keeping up something like the hairstyles that were done in Africa. And on top of that was the kind of, I don't want to say brainwashing exactly, but the kind of the white, okay, we could call it brainwashing. The slave owners would tell the slaves that their hair was inferior, that they would even classify it as wool, to suggest that the blacks were more animalistic, and if they were animals, they were easier to keep as slaves, because if they thought themselves as inferior, it was easier to keep them, under their control. So this was what happened. And then you had blacks, instead of trying to make the elaborate hairstyles of Africa, they were more in trying to straighten the hair and make it look more European. And that's where the transition really happened, from loving and adorning the hair in the traditional African sense to trying to make the hair fit into a European standard. So that's what chapter 1 is, and that's why it's called Black Hair in Bondage.
So then we're going to skip to a section we have an entire chapter on the afro. And Lori and I were born in the early 70s, as the afro was still around, but it was losing its hold. And we both assumed as we were writing this book that, oh, everybody loved the afro. Everybody wore an afro. I look at old pictures of my family. They all had afros. But as we learned while we were writing this, it was not the case at all. And the hairstyle also, while it started with very political roots behind it, no pun intended, it definitely really transitioned into more of a fashion statement. So the opening of that chapter, and the chapter is called Revolutionary Roots, Naturals, Afros, and the Changing Politics of Hair, 1965 to 1979. In 1964, Philadelphia artist Samuel Roosevelt was an 18-year-old Air Force airman first class stationed in the Philippines, and he had a problem. After a number of fruitless searches and some unfortunate haircuts, Roosevelt was unable to find a good barber. His solution was simply to let his hair grow. Upon release from the military in 1966, Roosevelt and his uncut hair returned home to Philadelphia, where he was promptly made fun of by friends and family. They told me that I looked a mess and needed to go and do my hair, Roosevelt recalls. Then less than a year later, they were running around with afro picks, trying to get their fros higher and acting like this was how they had always looked all of their lives. Between 1964 and 1966, colored people and Negroes became black people. And these black people overwhelmingly chose to adopt a new black-identified visual aesthetic, an aesthetic that not only incorporated an alternative to straight hair, but actually celebrated it. In the mid-60s, black hair underwent its biggest change since Africans arrived in America. The very perception of hair shifted from one of style to statement. And right or wrong, blacks and whites came to believe that the way black people wore their hair said something about their politics. Hair came to symbolize either a continued move toward integration in the American political system or a growing cry for black power and nationalism. Many African Americans began to use their hair as a way to show a visible connection to their African ancestors and blacks throughout the diaspora. It was an era in which hair took a prime spot, right next to placards, amendments, and marches, and defining a black identity for the world at large. And I think some 20, 30 years after the Afro, looking back on it and its significance, I think the two most important things about it was that one, it was the first time that black people collectively showed that they, well, not this, but, an Afro was what their hair really looked like underneath the perms and the straightening combs and wigs and all the other things that we were doing. It was also important because it was the first time that hair was a political statement that we were consciously making. Whereas today, I think a lot of times we do things to our hair because we like it, whether it's straight hair or braids or weave or whatever we do. A lot of times we assume, well, I'm just doing this because this is how I like my hair. But other people are still reading all these political things onto it. And it definitely, I think, began with the Afro. In the last section, I can't lean.
Excuse me. The last section we're going to read is from the 80s, the beginning of the 80s chapter, which we call Politically Incorrect, Black Hair's New Attitude. And this is from transitioning from the Afro, where the hair was so political and so meaningful, to a point where the hair became devoid of any political meaning, and it really became a matter of style. And it was almost as if people were trying to put the Afro as far behind them as possible and doing straight styles. And if you remember Patti LaBelle, she kind of stands out as a prime example. You always were wondering how high her wings were going to go, but she just kind of stands out as that time. That's what people were really just going for. It fit with the decade of the me decade of the Reaganomics and everything else that kind of symbolized excess in the 80s. But the interesting thing was that the decade started 1979 with the movie 10 and a woman named Bo Derek, who made a big splash in the black hair community with cornrows. Excuse me. In 1979, Bo Derek made the movie 10. In it, she wore her hair in cornrows with beads on the end, the same style that Cicely Tyson had worn more than a decade earlier. By 1980, on the pages of Time and Newsweek, and in the lexicon of the population at large, cornrows had come to be known as bow braids. Even those mainstream publications that took the time to note the African roots of the style seldom included photos of black women wearing them. Some like to point to Bo Derek as an example of America's embracing a multicultural, more inclusive beauty ideal. The response was not favorable on all fronts, however. The African American community, and black women in particular, saw it as adding insult to injury. Quote, "I saw danger in Bo Derek," remembers Ms. Magazine's Marsha Gillespie. What offended me was that it was bad enough that they were going to tell me that she was the most beautiful woman in the world, but then to put her in cornrows as if to cover all the bases? After years of being seen as the anti-beauty, Black women now had to face something that was essentially stripped of its historical legacy and only given a claim after being adopted by a white blonde woman. In an interview shortly after 10's release, Roberta Flack, who had been wearing her natural hair braided for some time, expressed her anger. Quote, "Black women were wearing cornrows long before Bo Derek," unquote, she told the Christian Science Monitor. "I took issue that whites made such a big thing about Bo Derek and cornrows. I can see this Bo Derek doll going out, the 10 doll with braids, and they'll make a zillion dollars off of it," unquote. In a Jet magazine article headline, "On a scale of 1 to 10, blacks rate angry over Bo Derek's hairdo fad," stylists, celebrities, and other Black women and men echoed Flack's statements. Blacks overwhelmingly felt as though a cultural legacy had been literally whitewashed. So that just kind of goes to the question that we are often asked: is hair political? Is it still political? And people always want to think of black hair being political as just the 60s, you know, it's the afro, that was the political time, and then it just stopped being political. And this is just another example, is when we talk about cultural misappropriation, when we talk about black people straightening their hair and trying to look white or non-black people wearing traditionally black styles. We even in this chapter we talk about dreadlocks as well, and we get into can black people co-opt a style that's not Black Americans. That style wasn't a Black American style. It was more of a traditionally Jamaican style, and it's not even Jamaican necessarily. There's roots of dreadlocks in Asian societies from centuries ago. So this was when the discussion of black hair being political, it covers so many different realms. And this is where a lot of times non-black people don't understand why it can be considered so political. When we talk about the business of black hair, we do a chapter on that as well. And a lot of major manufacturers, non-black ones, they make bids to purchase companies and don't understand the outroar, the way that the black community will respond when a white company makes a bid to buy a black company, because it's never been just hair, even in the business of black hair, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry today, and it has always been a very thriving business, and there always has to be explanations why hair is political. So
Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. I really, really, really hate when I hear people say dreadlocks. Now, please let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, if my reading was completely wrong on this. Because from what I read, historically, it was always known as locks. And historically, European people thought it was dreadful. And that's when the whole name dreadlocks came about. Now, please let me know if I'm wrong. I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong, because this is a learning experience for me, just like it is for you.
the rest of the book, after the 80s chapter, we talk about, we have a separate chapter called The Culture of Black Hair, where we try to explain what it means to live in America with black hair. We talk about the language of black hair. We talk about the rights and rituals of growing up with black hair, the technology, the tools, all of these things that if you are a black person in America, you probably understand what we're talking about. Or if you have access to the black community, you also know what we're talking about. But if you don't, which is a lot of the rest of America, you have no idea what we're talking about, and that's why we try to write it down and explain it. And in the last chapter, we kind of do a state of where we are today with black hair in America.
So we wanted to open it up for questions, comments, suggestions. Yeah.
Testimonials.
There's one in the back.
You spoke about the military. I was in the Army from 1968 to 1993. So I went through that phase when the hair was a big issue. Did you interview military personnel? Because just recently did the military change its documents on how black hair could be worn, because during the Desert Storm, it was more practical for women to wear their hair braided. However, They got in a lot of trouble because it wasn't in the regulations that it was authorized.
Oh.
And a lot of women were punished.
Really? And we
And
didn't
then
know
there were
that.
like white first sergeants that would say to women, I find your hair offensive.
No, we didn't. I'm learning about this.
We talked to a couple from the 60s when they
Right.
were coming out of the military, more people who had always kept their hair short and kept their hair in military style cuts, and then when they came out, they were so surprised and even shocked themselves. One man we interviewed in the Midwest, he was in the Navy, and he remembers seeing the afro, and he had been indoctrinated, if you will, to believe that that was a good hairstyle, keep it short. And when he saw that afro, he with all his military training, he was really like, that's a bad thing. It's a horrible thing. It's not right to have your hair looking that crazy.
Let me know in the comments, are there any hairstyles that you consider to be offensive? And also, explain why. I'm curious to know the answer to that. I am so apologetic for constantly pausing the video, but my curiosity peaks and I have to ask questions.
So those are the military people we spoke to were more from were more 60s.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to know how you would classify the hairstyles today, in particular of the young crowd. I think it's very unique, and someone else coming from the old school, I think, doesn't understand it, black or not black.
I think you have to be really careful answering that because it's so regional. Living in New York, I think I have a definite idea that, everyone's just kind of doing whatever with their hair, and they'll have, a long weave on Monday, and they'll have dread extensions by Friday, and it means the same thing to them. But then when we travel or when I just talk to people from other parts of the country, I realize that's not necessarily the case. Young people, I think, have always been the most creative and daring in what they'll do with their hair, and a lot of that is, first of all, they have a lot of time, and they don't necessarily have to get a job. Someone's supporting them, so they don't have to really worry about how their hair is going to be read. I think today, more and more people there's definitely way more natural styles, and there are also a lot of, you can get dread extensions, you can get an afro weave. You can get, there are all these combinations of things, whereas in the past, if you had an afro, you weren't even thinking about getting a weave, and it meant two totally different things, and now people are mixing those things up, and you have women who are wearing straight hair and wigs, and it's not a secret. They're like, yeah, my hair is pink and here today, and it's short pixie blonde cut the next day, and it's fun. I think hair is a lot more fun. I think that we have more public figures who wear a diversity of hairstyles than we ever have in the past. I mean, there's still definitely way more women with long, straight hair in the public. But, there's even Halle Berry with her short cut, and Lisa Bonet and Lauryn Hill, and even men, Maxwell, D'Angelo, Allen Iverson. There's a lot more diversity. I think I think the issue today is that people are doing things just for fun or just because I like it. But then, my stepbrother had cornrows for a while, and he had a hard time getting a job after school. He's not straight A student. He's a good student. He's a good kid. But people thought he looked like a thug. I've had conversations with members of my family who used to wear afros and who, follow the Black Power movement, who today are like, I don't know if I would hire a guy with cornrows because they look thuggish. I'm like, what are you talking about? Talk to him, see if he's thuggish. How are you just going to write him off because of his hairstyle, especially if you're a child of the 60s and you're saying that. But it definitely happens, and that's reality. And I think today we need to be aware of the fact that, you might decide to wear a wig that is, multicolored and all these things, and it's just how you want to look that day, but you have to understand other people are deciding all of these other things about you.
So you wouldn't classify some of the radical hairstyles like, I can't think of his name, sometimes when they wear the plait sticking out, straight out to the side, you wouldn't classify that as a political statement?
Are you talking about Busta Rhymes?
Busta Rhymes. And then the knot.
I don't think with Busta Rhymes, I don't think he's a celebrity. So I think the things that they do are not necessarily, I don't think anyone's asking Gwen Stefani if she's relating to the punk movement because her hair is pink and, doing these different things. I think celebrities kind of do what they decide to do, unless they really
Attention.
to get attention, and because they can, because their livelihood, it actually will probably be helped along if they look different from everyone else. But no, I don't think Busta Rhymes is making a political statement with his hair. And I think, if anything, he's probably opening the door a little more, especially now that he's making movies and he's way more mainstream than he was when he started out in his career, for someone who decides to wear dreads, maybe to have like one less hurdle to cross when they're going in front of a white person for a job or in front of a black person who thinks styles like that are radical.
Is there any fashion of wearing bandanas that hide the hair completely?
Historically, it's interesting because in slavery, we know that a lot of black women wore kerchiefs, and people assume that that is something that black people have historically always done. When in fact, in our research, we found that it was because the hair was so glorified in Africa, covering it was something that people did not do. I mean, it was not something you wouldn't cover your hair. It was your identifier, so you would not put something on it. And in slavery, people covered it more out of shame or just because they didn't have time to, they didn't have time to do something to it. So today it's interesting when you see people saying they're reclaiming their African heritage by wearing a kerchief. That's not really true, although there are other African nations where you have head wraps and things like that, but that's, again, it's just a type of, I think, black Americans' ability to be creative and expressive. And of course you see young people today, boys and girls wearing bandanas, headscarves. And again, I think that just points to our creativity and in incorporating different looks. And you look at celebrities too. I mean, something like Erykah Badu, who took her bandana to the 10th extreme, but still that kind of led the way for people to, make it shorter, smaller, but still the idea that, we can incorporate head wraps with beautiful cloths, beautiful colors, and for men who don't want to go all that way, but still they too can incorporate that look into their fashion sense. I think there's a...
Okay, once again, please forgive me for constantly pausing the video, but if you made it to this point of the video, please drop this video a like and subscribe to the channel.
question back there.
Noted that there is, from what I understand, there is a tradition of wrapping the head in West Africa, and that just the style of wrap also, along with the hair, indicates a certain status, marital status, that there's specific ways in which you wrap, which means certain things. But first of all, I just wanted to tell you both that you're beautiful.
Thank you.
And yeah. And second, before I run out, I just had a quick question. You talked about the 80s, and I mean, I was born in 72, and we might be around, peers. And I remember, just growing up in the 80s and the asymmetrical cuts and all that other stuff that we used to do, and you contextualize the 80s very well in terms of history. And I wondered, kind of like with the question that this woman asked here, in terms of the 90s and the weaves and the wigs, do you see that historically as just kind of going back to the 60s where we wore wigs and it's just kind of coming back around, or do you see that more in terms of the culture of the late 90s and what that, what values that might be connected to that? Just as the 80s, you said it was kind of coming from the excess and the da-da-da-da. I wondered if you kind of could comment on the wigs and the weaves now, as opposed to how they may have been at another point in our history.
I think it's interesting, and this is why writing this book was so interesting, was to see the historical continuum, because people were wearing wigs. Black male slaves were wearing wigs in the 1700s in emulation of the slave masters who also wore wigs. In the 50s, women wore wigs because they couldn't get the long, straight styles that were in fashion, black or white. Both were wearing wigs.
In the 20s, actually, women who had managed to grow really long hair when the flapper styles came in started wearing short wigs because they refused to cut their hair, but, they wanted to look. in style.
So then in the 80s, when weaves became very popular, the idea was you can wear a weave and get that long hair and not let anyone know that you're wearing a weave. There was definitely a secrecy about wearing a weave or a wig. You didn't tell anybody. Whereas in the 90s and today, you have people wearing wigs and weaves, but they're a lot more upfront about it. You don't get the kind of, you have to do it at, 2 o'clock in the morning and disappear for a week and come back and hope no one notices that your hair just grew. And that's, I think, the difference that we're seeing today versus 10 years ago. You have celebrities also, which celebrities really set fashion trends a lot for us. And when you have a celebrity like Tyra Banks, who we talked to for this book, who can go on Oprah or go anywhere and say quite freely, yeah, this is a weave, and I wear a weave because it's easier for me to get different styles as a model. It's it's too much work on my hair to be switching styles and trying to curl it one day and do this and do the other thing. It's a weave, and you too can have hair like Tyra. I'll tell you the kind I use. Toni Braxton, same thing. Whereas essentially there's this openness about it now, and this person like Little Kim, who can wear a long wig that nobody believes that is her hair. It's platinum blonde or pink or orange, and so it's like, yes, I'm faking it, but it just goes with what I'm wearing today. And that, again, I think shows a development of acceptability within the Black community and a kind of a, we don't care what anyone else says, this looks good on me today, I'm gonna try it. And again, because you can see it on television, on anything from a Sprite commercial to a video, these things are more acceptable, and people can step out of the house and not have the fear that, oh, I'm wearing a weave, that means something about me or anything. No, it means that somebody else was wearing it yesterday and it looked good, and I think it'll look good on me too.
But I also don't want to oversimplify that. I think too much. Well, I think there's still a huge idea of, if I don't have straight hair, I'm not attractive. If I don't have long hair, I'm not attractive. I mean, it's definitely, I think, lessening, but. And I think a lot of it's because, our generation, I was born in 73, we were raised by parents, whatever their hair looks like now, they probably had an afro, or their best friend did, or they knew about them. And so it was an idea to us that, you didn't have to straighten your hair, even if they now have straight hair. But so what Lori said, I think, is true, that a lot of times women more and more are like, well, it's just because I like it this way. But I think the question that a lot of us still have to ask ourselves is, okay, but could you also like it if it was that long and natural? And that's where we still are, where, no, for most people, and it's not just, oh, my face wouldn't look good with this, it's that we really think it would tie up so much of who we are to get rid of our hair.
For me, it's kind of troubling that it's no longer secretive. Not that it was good to be secretive, but it's just like, yes, I mean, this is a wig, and this is a wig. It's like, but when you put on a wig, how are you nurturing your own hair? I mean, your own hair is under there, and it's like it's not breathing. I don't know how well you're maintaining and caring for your own hair when you wear a wig all the time. And I guess that's a question.
One of the things we just wanted to say in writing the book, we weren't trying to say you should not have straight hair, everybody should cut their hair off and find their true inner self. That's not what we were trying to say. But if people understood the history of their hair, the power of their hair, and what their hair can do naturally, you still might choose to keep your hair straight. I mean, you might like it better that way, but to be informed and to know, that's what I think the main goal is, to for people. We're not hair care professionals. We're not telling you how to do your hair, but if we did have one aspect of that, it would just be that you understood the history of your hair before you said, oh, I have to keep my hair like this because it's not pretty the other way. It doesn't work the other way. I won't be accepted the other way. I think both of us, in doing our own projects, I cut my hair off after finding out the history of my hair, just because I wanted to see, what did this product, this thing that has brought us through so much, feel like?
Okay, let's be honest. We know the history of hair constantly changes. But I have a question. Let me know in the comments. Even though we know that hair constantly changes, are there any hairstyles that you wear that's the same hairstyles that your mother wear and your grandmother wear? I want to know, are there any hairstyles that you wear that has traveled through history? If that makes sense.
Again, it's still a choice. I could still decide to straighten my hair tomorrow, but it would be with an informed understanding of what my hair has been through, because it does have its own history.
I have two questions. One was, how did you decide to include, or who did you decide to interview? How did you make that decision in terms when you're saying there was Lisa Bonet and other people that you had interviewed? So I wanted to know a little bit about the process in that. Then you mentioned some really interesting facts about blacks in 18-something wearing wigs. How did you find that body of research? Was there a lot of it, or did you have to sort of like dig and dig and dig to find facts and to find this information?
I'll do the second part.
Okay.
The first part.
The answer to your first question, when we first decided to do the book and we had a proposal of we want to travel here and we want to talk to these people, as any first-time author would probably tell you, it was really reaching. Like, we were going everywhere. We were going to Brazil, we were going to Paris, we were going to Senegal, we were going all over the place on like our little advance. And we also had this huge list of people that we wanted to talk to. I think just because we'd both done projects on hair before, and it was just always something we were interested in, and just living in this, culture, we knew people, like I knew that Oprah once had made the statement on her show about always wanting hair that moves. So we wanted to talk to Oprah about that statement. And we wanted to talk to Lil' Kim because her hair is just so outrageous. And we wanted to talk to Lisa Bonet because she's always had these, during the 80s, while most people, she had weaves for a while on like the Different World time, but she also always had these, she had like Nubian twit, those knots for a while on her, like a couple of episodes, and she had short hair and she had dread extensions. This is before a lot of people were experimenting with lots of natural styles. We wanted to talk to Lauren because of her dreads. We wanted to talk to Erykah Badu. We had all these people we wanted to talk to. Well, Oprah doesn't talk to most people because she, especially now with her book club, she doesn't really want to seem like she's endorsing any one project. So we took Oprah off the list. And Lil' Kim was making an album, so we took her off the list. So the celebrities, it came down to, we definitely wanted to talk to a model. And Tyra Banks has made so many statements about her hair over the past and wearing weaves that we just made an effort to get in touch with certain people that we felt we just needed as key people. There were also certain academics, like bell hooks we've interviewed. We talked to Carolivia Haran, who wrote this children's book called Nappy Hair, which caused this huge uproar in Brooklyn in '98. Mm-hmm. And then we just wanted to talk to a lot of people on the street. So the internet was actually a really great tool for us. We had this, like, it wasn't a survey, but just kind of a questionnaire on hair, and we sent it out to, just people we knew. And we're like, please forward this. And every time I came back to my desk, I had like 30 new emails. We had no idea. And luckily, Lori was writing the chapter that included all of those things. So every day I was just like, more for you, Lori, and just forwarded all of them to her. But that was really amazing. And, every so often, one of those emails would be from somebody pointing out, oh, actually, you should talk to this person. They just did a study on whatever. And we also did focus groups around the country. Looked through photographs of our family members for ideas. So that was how it came up. And, as we were reading anything that someone else maybe had quoted somewhere, we would just try to find that person and talk to them for the book.
And then your other question about finding out information about wigs in the 1800s, actually the 18th century, 1700s, that was the hardest part of doing this research, in that this book has never been written before. Nobody has taken well, maybe they tried to and couldn't put it together for whatever reason, but there wasn't a document, there wasn't one body of work that said, this is what black people have been doing with their hair since the beginning of time. So we had to do things, we basically went to first-person sources. We looked at European explorers' travel logs and their diary descriptions of what Africans were doing with their hair. We looked at runaway slave posters that described in very detail, slave missing, looks like this, has hair like this, wears their hair like this. The things about the wigs that was mentioned in the runaway slave posters, wears a wig, often seen in a wig, trying to emulate his master, something like that. So we really did look at just documents that were from those times. We spent a lot of time in research libraries looking at also in newspapers, black newspapers, that also would describe these styles, what people should wear or shouldn't wear, what was fashionable for the time. So it was
the WPA interviews.
Right, the slave interviews were very instrumental in saying, this is what people were wearing, this is why they were wearing it. And it was better that way, actually, because it wasn't it wasn't subjective in any way. It was just description. So that's what we had to do, is pull from there, make inferences, and then talk to historians who could say, yes, this is what people were doing. This made sense for that time.
There's a woman in the back.
Some of your research, did you find that black men in the corporate world didn't have the freedom, or that black women? Because I find that I know in particular there are black men here that have graduated from law school or medical school, and some of them had dreads and they couldn't get a job. Mm-hmm. And when I saw them again, they said I had to cut my hair in order to get a job.
Mm-hmm. I think the fight over how to wear your hair in the workplace started with black women in the late 70s and early 80s, when we started wearing cornrows a lot. And women of every class level were wearing their hair braided or in cornrows. And there was a huge class action suit taken against the Hyatt hotels from about 1,000 women in the Washington, D.C. area who had been suspended or fired from their jobs for wearing braids. There were a lot of individual court cases, mostly from flight attendants, hotel front desk people who were getting in trouble over their hairstyles. And the EEOC actually in a lot of those cases went in favor of the women, saying that their hairstyle was part of their culture, it was a cultural legacy, and they should be allowed to wear it as long as it was neat and presentable, which of course gets into other issues of, who's going to decide what's neat and presentable. But that opened the door for women to have a lot more choices, I think, of what they could wear their hair like. Even though we still, earlier we did a radio show, and a woman called in and she wants to cut her hair. She's straight, relaxed hair now, and she wants to cut it to a natural and eventually grow dreadlocks. She works in a very corporate culture, and she's nervous about how that's going to be taken. But men today, I think, face a lot more problems than women with dreadlocks, not just in corporate settings, but also in the service industry, messengers, bank tellers.
Who are interfacing with corporate clients sometimes.
And there are actually a number of lawsuits that men have brought out now. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about how I think for most of these men, if you ask them, they like dreads. And the reasons might be a mixture of just, aesthetic choice with cultural choices, but they probably weren't trying to take on, their employer whatsoever when they weren't making a big statement. They were doing what they thought was attractive for their hair. And yet they're still faced with all these issues that I think a lot of us thought, maybe we'd moved past. Yes.
One question too. What is it that you come away with a book that probably shocked you the most in your research? And I do agree with you that a lot of times you do make those hair decisions on where you are working with your employer. Because I remember when I used to work in the corporate world, I came with not braids. When I got comfortable enough there and established myself, I put my hair in braids. I remember the night that when I came to Penn for an interview, because I did not know who was interviewing me and what their thoughts might be about me, I just got my hair braided, stood up all night long. I had girlfriends come over, took the whole braiding hairstyle out because I wasn't sure who was going to interview me and whether or not my braids were going to impact their decision.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
When you came away with your research, what was it that either reversed a belief or an assumption that you had about black hair that you learned that was totally just...
Do you want to start?
I think for me, the part that was so amazing to me was the chapter that we did on the business of black hair. I think I wrote in the chapter, it was kind of sarcastic of me, but I wrote, not every black person was a slave picking cotton in the South during slavery, because we found that there were many, many, many black men and women, in some cases, more men than women, but who were able to prosper during slavery by being barbers. And they were barbers for white people. The black barbers were the ones who were leading the field of blacks and white in terms of being the most innovative and offering the best services in salon services for men and women. And in fact, it was black men from the islands who were the most sought after hairstylists, because the islands were mostly European owned, so they were considered to have, they were supposed to be the best, knowing the most about European fashion and style. And since all the Americans, the American colonists, they wanted to be as fashionable as the Europeans, they were like, get me one of those men from, the French West Indies. I want him to do my hair. And they made enough money. These black barbers, some of them were slaves, would work enough to buy their own freedom and then buy the freedom of their loved ones, their family members, or buy their own slaves if they wanted to. Two black barbers were the founders of the first black university. Wilberforce University was founded by the funds of two black barbers. So to me, finding out that hair, granted it was doing white hair, but still black people in the hair industry during slavery were able to build, to start this legacy, this foundation, and pour money back into the black community. That to me is incredible, and that they were able to hold on to this business until today, where we have a multi-billion-dollar, it's about a $12 billion industry today. To me, that blew my mind. I didn't realize the economic power of black hair and that it started in this country as soon as black people got here.
Were they originally brought here as slaves?
Well, officially they were indentured servants, but they were quickly made into slaves after about 50 years.
Let's see.
Your
Well,
aha moment?
I think the biggest thing for me was actually it just changed my own opinions on different hairstyles that I maybe see every day on the street or on the subway. I used to always judge a hairstyle by would I do it to my own hair. There's a whole lot of things I would not do to my own hair, so I didn't really appreciate them, or that's crazy, how could they go out of the house looking like that? And over the course of, and I didn't want to put that idea into the book, but I had it. And as I did more research, as I read, because Lori and I split up writing the chapters, as I read her chapters and as I was researching my own, I just came to have such an appreciation for our hair, and not just in its natural state, but just the artistic things that we do with it. And
Okay, be honest in the comments. Let me know exactly how do you judge hair. This young lady just said she judged hair by, whether she would do it to her own hair. Do you do the exact same way, whether you like something or don't like it? Or is it, like, ooh, this ugly? Or, what do you say to yourself?
some of the most artistic works of art are straightened hairstyles, like the things that you see in hair shows. And this year, like the woman who won, the style that won the big hair show in Detroit was a helicopter. No one's walking down the street with their hair in a helicopter, but it's still, it's. But for me, it was just learning to accept and have such an appreciation for all of the different things that we do with our hair. And someone asked us once, who do you think are great hair, has great hair? And one of the women I said was Little Kim. And she kind of looked at me shocked because I think she expected me to just run off the list of every natural hair person in the public eye. And I love Little Kim's hair. Like, I love all the daring things that she will do with it. I love that she does not try to act like it's really her hair, and that it's fun. Would I ever do that? No. But so for me, that was just having the appreciation for our hair, not only so that you can make informed choices about what you do yourself, but just to appreciate, what other people are doing. And also, one small thing that I learned is that Madam C.J. Walker did not invent the hot comb, which Lori knew. She'd learned that from her master's thesis, but I didn't know that. And the fact that everyone knows her name, and people either know her as the first self-made female millionaire in the United States, or they condemn her for, and she gave us the straightening comb. And I'm like, actually, she didn't. She introduced it to Black America, but, it had been around. And if someone else had just picked up the Sears and Roebuck catalog that it was available in and noticed that it probably worked for our hair, they would have done it. So those were two things that I got from it. And how are we on time, actually? How are we on time?
Great.
Okay.
This gentleman.
I got here late, so maybe you discussed it. So if I did, I'm sorry. But did you talk in your book? Do you talk about the politics of hair within the group?
Within the Black community?
Yes.
Yeah, you can.
That's something that we wanted to. A lot of people assume that the issues about black hair, it's all black people facing white America, and if white America just understood our hair, we'd be happier, healthier people. But when we found in most of our interviews with everyday people was that many of the most divisive situations about hair come within the black community. When we're talking, we talked about this in our radio show this morning, that black people will say, our parents or our grandparents will say, don't do that to your hair. You will not get a job. It looks bad. We worked so hard to not have to look like that.
No
Please
man's
don't do
gonna
that.
want you.
You used to be cute, all of these things that come from within the black community. And also, again, from historically, it started with black companies even saying, the barbers who I was just speaking about, the black barbers who were excelling during slavery couldn't do black hair. They couldn't do the hair of their own brethren, if you will. In the 20s, I'm giving you very obvious examples, but women who wanted to be dancers at certain nightclubs in Harlem, if your hair wasn't a certain straightness, you couldn't work there. Churches would say, you can't come into our church if your hair doesn't pass the comb test. We found anecdotal evidence of combs being hung on the front door of a church, and if your hair couldn't pass through this fine-tooth comb, you couldn't be a member of that church.
It's actually Philadelphia churches.
I remember. But so yes, the politics of black hair within the black community, I think, would probably astound most non-black people, because again, the politics come from within our community of historically saying, you will get ahead if you look like this. You will be left behind if your hair looks like this. And whether it's people championing that because they just care about you and want you to be able to get ahead, or people really taking that to heart and saying, you are no good if your hair looks like that. It really does come, I think, from within the black community. So that's not to say that non-black people don't have their own issues or misbeliefs or misconceptions about hair, but I think the political, real arguments and divisiveness comes from within. And again, which is why we want everybody to read our book, then give it to your grandmother and have her read it too.
One of the reasons that people outside of our community view our hair politically is simply because we don't understand it and we don't respect it, and we don't bring to it the kind of ethnic understanding of who it is and what it is. So what it does is it gives the larger community the ability to feed into whatever they want to feed into.
Sure.
And so that's never going to change until we change.
I agree.
I'm sorry.
No, you put it very well. I think this one gentleman right there had one last question.
Research that you've done, do you think that, because sometimes you might do research and you say, okay, well, let's put most of the information in the first book. Would you do another book? Or are you thinking about doing another book?
There's definitely a lot more information that we could include, especially in the last chapter. Well, just speaking to you right now, that's a whole other thing that we did not, about the military. We didn't go into that, right? That's huge. When we were writing, there's one chapter on just on the culture of black hair, and just the issues about dating with black hair. That could be an entire book. The last chapter, we really tried to sum up everything that was going on, but we really did not give as much space to certain... the book is just about America, and that was pretty easy to just write about black Americans and keep it this very monolithic group throughout most of the book, until you get to the 80s and the 90s, especially in places like New York, where there's a lot of West Indian immigration, and the hair issues, like the groups against each other and common issues, and we don't really go into that. So there's definitely more for another book. Will there be another book? I don't know. Lori's having a baby, and I'm taking a break, and so, but there could be.
We also think we got a lot of comments from Hispanic people who were they're so connected to a lot of these issues, and they say they have the same terms, pelo bueno and pelo malo, with good hair, bad hair, that they also deal with. And people said, did you mention the Latino community? And no. Not because we didn't care, but because we were trying to focus. But again, that's another, it's either a whole new book or, an edition, second edition paperback. We'll add an extra chapter. But there's definitely like these other groups that definitely deal with the same issues in America, but, they're not quote unquote Black Americans, which is something, it's hard to define in and of itself. So I think that was going to be the end. Thank you all so much for coming.
Okay, so let's be honest here. I learned quite a lot, but there are two things that these young ladies talked about that I want to bring up. The young lady said she loves how Lil Kim has fun artistically with her hair. Now, I want you to go into the comments and let me know, do you agree with that or disagree? And if you disagree with choosing Lil Kim, who would you put in their place? And second, you can't get a job if you do that to your hair. First off, have you ever heard someone say that before? And if you have, let me know what hairstyle did you or that particular person was doing or had in their hair to make that person say that. I'm curious. I want to go look at pictures and all that different kind of stuff. And also let me know, did that person get the job? Also, let me know if there's any subjects or anything that you learned from this video. I want to have a discussion with you. Uh, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and also watch more videos.